Jewish speaker that I could think of our times today. And I was prepared to read his official biography and credentials and all of his many accolades and awards. And I had asked him beforehand, how would he like to be introduced? And he said, you just introduce me, and that will be sufficient. But I know from a personal level, and I think many of you too, that probably nobody has struggled more with the question of why the Holocaust, or what is the Holocaust, and about the Holocaust. Nobody probably has struggled more with the identity of being Jewish and Judaism. And I don't want to take it to its bottom, but I just want to say it is one of the most wonderful honors I have ever had to introduce to you tonight Elie Wiesel.
Distinguished rabbis, friends, Mr. Chairman, I remember a story which is funny. Many, many years ago, a Jew in New York worked for the Zionist movement, and he made many speeches. And then Israel came into being, and he was offered a chance to go to Israel. When he came back, he still made speeches. And he said, my friends, he said, do you remember all the lies I used to tell you? They are true. What you saw about the Rebbe on the film is not a lie, it is true. Although I must tell you that, am not a Hasid of Lubavitch. I say so because there are so many of you here that I'm afraid that you may co-opt me, which is not so terrible. But still, the truth must be said, I belong to Vishnitz. I'm a Hasid of Vishnitz. But Hasid is Hasid, and we do not claim any exclusivity, nor do we claim any special privilege to belong where we belong. I do believe, as a Hasid of Vishnitz, that the Rebbe of Lubavitch today, and it is true what it is being said, is probably the greatest Jewish figure in the Jewish world. There is no doubt to my mind that few spiritual leaders had such vision, such courage, such determination, and such talent to choose his associates, I mean his shlichim, and every shaliach of his is an associate, to spread the word of Hasidut, of Lubavitch, of Judaism, and therefore of what makes the substance, the essence, and the beauty of Jewishness. Now, I remember a story from my hometown that during the month of Elul, and especially during the week before Rosh Hashanah, there was a custom, and I still remember it, that the shamis, the beadle, would go from window to window and knock in the window, and he would say in Yiddish, naturally, Yidden steht auf zu Sliches. Jews get up for the service of Slichot. I still hear the voice of that man. And believe me, my friends, I would give much that I have to hear it again. For with that custom and with that story and with that voice, a whole generation is gone, and more than a generation. A way of life, a mode of philosophy, a mode of commitment. Because then it was enough for a voice to say, get up, and people got up. Today there are too many voices. We live probably in the noisiest generation ever. Never before have people spoken so much. Never before have so many vehicles been invented to carry the spoken word. It is television or telephone or radio, and how many stations. I really believe that if there could be a moment of silence introduced in our lives, it would be welcome, because we cannot take it anymore. And therefore, when you hear the voice that says, wake up, we listen. And isn't that the voice of Chabad? Isn't that the voice of Hasidut? And isn't that the voice of Judaism to the world? That we are going around from window to window saying, wake up, don't sleep, don't be indifferent, don't live in comfort, and surely not in apathy. I must tell you that as a Hasid today, I have been fascinated with whatever the movement stands for since my childhood. I love the Hasidic movement. I really can define my relationship with it as my relationship with the Jewish people. It's a passionate relationship filled with Ahavat Israel, which is probably the cardinal point of Hasidism since the Besh, the love for our fellow Jews, which means really the love for Israel. There is one other point in Hasidism which you must know of, and I'm sure that those Lubavitch are here, and I know some of them, they know of that point, and that is called the book Haverim, the stress on friendship. I have studied the history of religious movements because I teach humanities, I teach literature of religion and philosophy of religion and religion of philosophy, whatever you want. But in my studies, I have never found any movement, any religious movement, which stresses friendship the way we do since the Besh. If I could define with one word, but there is more than one word, the Hasidic thrust, it is friendship, meaning friendship between one another, friendship between the individual and the community, and friendship, after all, between the individual and his or her creator. Never before has such a thought been formulated, that God is not only our judge, God is not only our king, nor is he only the ruler of the universe. He is our friend. And that relationship between creator and creature, or creator and creation, the relationship of friendship, is something that appeals to me, and I am sure it appeals to you, with extraordinary force, because it enflames our imagination. I am wondering very often, how come that the Hasidic movement is still around? After all, the main target of the enemy between 1939 and 45 were the Hasidim. 3 million out of the 6 million came from Hasidic background. And again, when you study that movement, you don't understand. These were the gentlest, saddest when they had to be sad, and joyous when there was reason to be joyous people in the world. A Hasid never asks anything from anyone except from himself or herself. A Hasid is always ready to be satisfied with one has. And yet these humanists, in the best sense of the word, were targeted by the enemy. And rationally, they should have disappeared. After all, think about it. The great centers in Eastern Europe, Lublin and Lizhensk and Mezerich and Berdichev, you study today the modern history and your heart aches. Once upon a time, when I was a child, when I read Berdichev, it meant Reb Levi Yitzchok. And I read Lizhensk, it meant Rabbi Elimelech. And I read Onipol, it meant Rabbi Zusia. And today you open the history books and you read Berdichev, a few hundred Jews were killed that day and a few thousand Jews were killed that day. And you read Lizensk, and again it means massacre. A tempest of fire and blood has swept through Europe and carried all these centers away. And logically, they should have disappeared, especially since most of the Hasidic masters went with their Hasidim. In most cases, you spoke of Mesirat Nefesh, Rabbi Duchman. I testify to that. In most cases, the rabbi, the Rebbe in town, had always a chance to be saved, sometimes even by the priests in town. In 99% of the cases, all the rabbis, all the masters, all the teachers chose to go with their communities, even if it meant, and it meant, to die with them. So the Hasidim were killed, the children were massacred, and the rabbis vanished with them. It was normal to assume that after the war there would be no more Hasidic movement. Why not? There are cycles in history. We had the time of the Tanaim, and then the Amoraim, and then the Geonim, and then the Kabbalists, and then the first Hasidim. There are cycles. Maybe that cycle too could have been closed. It wasn't. One of the great miracles is the rebirth, the renaissance of the Hasidic movement. And I'm sure that much credit is due to Lubavitch for that. To others too, let's not be exclusive. Vizhnitz is not bad. And even Satmar, even Satmar and Sige, even they have done something. I don't agree, but but the Hasidim have brought not only Hasidut in America, they have brought Torah in America. The once upon a time yeshivot that were Musar dominated now are Hasidic oriented. The great Hasidic movements in America have the best yeshivot, and they produce the best teachers, but above all they produce Ahavat Israel. Now why really am I here? I'll tell you why. First, because I love what you are doing, and I have a profound affection and admiration for the Rebbe. I have met the Rebbe years and years ago, and we spent nights and nights together, struggling. I was struggling at least, not about being Jewish. I have never struggled about being Jewish. I had other problems, but never that one. For me, being Jewish is a privilege, and it is up to us to raise that privilege higher and higher and give it meaning, Jewish meaning, and because of its Jewishness, universal meaning. But I had problems, and I love to be with the Rebbe. He is a man of knowledge, passion, dedication. He knows how to listen, which is something. So do I. So we listened a lot. So much so that once when I wrote a novel, I took him as one of my main characters. And since then, we saw each other, meaning I came to see him often at night. And I would send him my books. I write in French, and he reads French perfectly. And he answered every book. I have letters now that one day will be, I think, more important probably than my own books. And I remember once I wrote him about, I sent him a book, a novel, and he sent me back a 12-page letter. And the novel dealt with problems of faith and God. So he wrote back really 12 pages about problems of faith and why faith must be affirmed and not only questioned, since I also question faith, but never without remaining inside that faith. But at the end, it was many, many years ago, he finished and he said, by the way, he said, why don't you get married? We were speaking about faith, about history, but he wanted also, why don't you get married? when I did get married, the first bouquet of flowers I got in Jerusalem was from the Rebbe. It also the most beautiful one. You promised our listeners that in an hour and 10 minutes it will be over. I think I have 3 more minutes. I will...
Take 8.
8? No. What else? Why? Is there another reason? Yes, there is another reason as well. I teach, and my passion is study and teaching. Meaning I love to be with young people, and occasionally I leave my university and go around the country lecturing. And I must tell you that I am very moved when I meet in these small places Chabad Shlichim. There are universities here that, were it not for the Shlichim of Chabad, hundreds and hundreds of Jewish young boys and girls would be lost to our people. What I'm saying you is true. I wouldn't lie. Why should I? I am not a Chabadnik. I'm a Vishnitz. But also, because it's Chodesh Elul, one doesn't lie before Rosh Hashanah. It is true. Hundreds of them would be lost to the drugs, to the cults, or to indifference, or to other things. But somehow, there is always a Chabadnik who arrives, and he opens a Lubavitch center. And these young boys and girls who need a presence, who need a warm handshake, who need a sentence or 2 or 3, somehow they are drawn to them, and they remain sons and daughters of our people. So if they can do that much for so many of children in so many places, the least I could do is come here in New York and bear witness to what they are doing. In the Orient, I also spent time in the Orient when I was a student. I learned a lot about Indian philosophy, Hinduism. That was used to be my interest then. Still is, but from a different viewpoint. And I remember a very, very special custom I would witness. Do you know how 2 friends behave in India when they want to give each other a present? The most beautiful present is that a person comes and brings a bird in a cage. And the present is that a friend can set the bird free. How more beautiful is it to be able to say, thanks to me or to you, a hungry person is no longer hungry? I studied your program, the Colel program in Israel. I thought I knew much about Lubavitch. I studied at Tanya, the Likutei Amorim. You know, I'm writing about the Rebbe, a book, so I know a lot, I think. I'll learn more. I didn't really know that the Colel of Chabad was the first Colel in Palestine on Eretz Israel. I'm glad I know now. I didn't know that you were not only helping soldiers like tefillin in the army, nor did I know that you are also helping orphans, war orphans in Israel. But you simply have a kitchen to give soup for hungry. I must tell you, I almost feel bad about it. To be here in the Plaza Hotel with so much food around, and to think that we have to give hungry people soup, it hurts. Is it possible that we live in the same world? That we belong to the same people? Is it possible that there are hungry people among our people? what greater privilege then is it than to be able to think or to say, here, thanks to tonight, one person less will be hungry in Eretz Israel or anywhere. My friends, I think we live in biblical times. Our generation is a very special generation. I will take 2 more minutes. I'll tell you why, because somebody came up and mentioned that he had saw me on television last year about the nuclear war. I am not a television person. I don't like television. It's too much spectacle. Even the information, the news is not what I want it to be. I want it to be better. I would like the broadcaster one day to come and say, the Mashiach is coming. You know, fine. But that program was an important one. 100 million program watched it about the nuclear menace. I went. I listened to everybody, Kissinger, McNamara, they all were specialists. I was the only Amoritz. I was the only ignorant there. I didn't know anything about science, about politics. I still don't. So I listened. And they each one wanted always to speak. I never raised my hand. I'm too shy and too ignorant. And then when my turn came after all, that couple, who is a good moderator and a friend, said, what do you think about it? And I said, you know, I had the feeling when I watched this program, meaning about nuclear catastrophe, that the whole world became Jewish. You should have seen the expression on the faces around the table there, you know. Instant conversion, you know. That's all we need. What did I really mean by that? I meant that for 2,000 years, the Jewish people lived in constant uncertainty. Now the whole world lives in constant uncertainty. For 2,000 years, we lived on the threshold of the unknown. We Jews never knew what will happen, what king will wake up and issue a new decree. Now the whole world lives on the threshold of the unknown. For 2,000 years, we always depended on the whim, on the capricious mood of any person, any ruler, anywhere. Now the whole world depends on the capricious whim or mood of a Gaddafi or a Khomeini if they were to get nuclear weapons. So I really felt that the whole world now knows what we felt for 2,000 years. And it's time that they should feel a little bit that too. However, it's not all. We survived. How did we survive? On one hand, whatever we have is usually taken away so fast. There's a man here who told me he was 5 years in Russia in a camp, and we spoke about communism. And he said, you know, he said, what power the Jews had in the Communist Party, it's true. But it was enough for Stalin to wake up in the morning and finished. No more power, they were all in jail. Go to better times. We had in Spain the golden age where total symbiosis was achieved between Jews and non-Jews. The prime minister was a Jew, and what a Jew, Don Yitzhak Abarbanel. The finance minister, Shmuel Hanagid. And we had philosophers and poets. It was enough for one king and his queen, Don Ferdinand and Isabella, to wake up one morning and finish. And all the power that we had was taken away. And yet, somehow we survived. How? First, because when we left Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, we were not the first people to be expelled from our homeland. Others have been expelled. But we were the only people in history that when we were expelled, we took a little book with us. And it is that little book, the Torah, yes, that keeps us alive, that kept us alive. It lived in us and we lived in it. And as for Hasidism, I'll tell you why Hasidism lives on. Because when the Hasid loses everything, he or she still has the Rebbe. Isn't this a lesson? A lesson that we all can share? receiving, giving, and above all, when it comes to approach Rosh Hashanah. And what is Rosh Hashanah if not Yom HaZikaron, the day of memory? May I, as a Vishnitzer Chossid, as a Hasid, as a Jew, wish you all a Ktiva v'Chatima Tova, a good year, healthy year, and a year placed perhaps above all under the sign of the Buk Haverim, of friendship. I thank you.
A wise person does not follow and just announces dinner will be served.